If you've seen my last video, you'll have heard how important it is to develop high value skills. And in this video, I'm going to share with you exactly how to talk about those skills during interview. Hi, my name is Abdul and I'm a fully qualified biomedical scientist working for the NHS in cellular pathology. The advice I'm about to give you in this video will greatly help you for your applications and interviews. I've used this formula for every interview I've had and I've scored really highly on this particular part. Okay, so let's start by going through some skills that you need to be able to talk about. Number one, teamworking. As a BMS, you need to be able to work well within a team. This is therefore a high valuable skill that lab managers are looking for when recruiting new staff. So when you get asked this question, talk about a situation that required you to work within a team or a group of people that you needed to work with to perform a particular task. Talk about what was your particular role and how you used your team effectively to complete that task. How did you figure out as a collective who did what, deciding who was more comfortable and competent with doing certain things and who wasn't. Talk about how much of a team player you were and how you offered to help others who are struggling. And also mention times where you struggled and how you've asked your team members for help as well. Really push the fact that you had to work as a team and doing it alone would have delayed the job. Now, that's the easy part. Let me tell you how to go levels and levels above other candidates. And I want you to pay very close attention to this part because this is the part where most people go wrong. This is the part that many people don't talk about. You're going to then talk about how this skill directly translates to the role you're applying for. 90% of people stop after talking about the time they worked in a team. Very rarely do candidates go that one step further and talk about how it actually is relevant to the role. So, for example, you'll say, my experience working in a team is relevant here because, and then you'll go on to explain why. So I'll give you an example. So you could say, I'll be required to work as part of a team in my role with other MLAs, biomedical scientists, and consultants to achieve accurate results. You will then go on to say, I learned how important teamwork was to share workload to a manageable level, which reduces the chances of mistakes to happen. And at this stage, you will use what I call is the golden formula. So before I explain the golden formula, I'll tell you the answer first and see if you can pick it out whilst I say this answer. Working as a team is super important because we deal with patient samples that may get affected from the mistakes. An inaccurate result may get produced which either delays or directly affects diagnosis and subsequently delays or directly affects treatment for that patient. The patient may then go on to receive the wrong treatment or get no treatment at all, which they may have needed to save their life. So that was it. That completes the perfect answer. Now, let's explain the golden formula that I just spoke about. It goes like this. Result, diagnosis, and treatment. Okay, those three things. That is the whole point of what we do as biomedical scientists. And you can use this golden formula for any interview for any role, whether it be for a BMS position or an MLA position. So seriously keep this in mind during your interview. And also, did you see how much detail I went into just that one skill and also linking its relevance to the role? This is how you can get ahead of 90% of candidates. So I'll explain the golden formula using another skill that you can talk about. The next one I want to talk about is knowing your limits. Now, this is a skill that not many people know about because it's one of those less obvious ones that you sort of learn whilst you do the job. So what do I mean by knowing your limits? Knowing your limits means that you wouldn't overstep your scope of practice and work outside your competence level. Essentially, it means that you're not going to try to perform the tasks that you're not supposed to do. The interviewer is not looking for the next greatest scientist. They need to know that you'll work safely and you won't try and play with expensive equipment and damage it, or even worse, risk damaging patient samples. So you could use an example in your previous experience where there was a problem and you had to raise it to a senior. If you went to university and you did a lab-based project, you could talk about where a piece of equipment had failed and that you had to get a supervisor to help, and then you'd go on to say how important it was to get the senior's attention to fix that problem rather than you trying to fix it yourself. And this is what I mean when that's something that's outside of your scope and that you didn't want to potentially make things worse. If you really can't think of an example or you didn't have an experience like that, then don't worry too much about it. Just talk about the risks that could happen if you did work outside your scope. And again, mention the risk of the patient sample being affected as well. So that is where you can link the skill to the role. After that, you can use the golden formula of how not having that skill will affect patient results, diagnosis, and effectively treatment. So there you go, those three things again: results, diagnosis, and treatment. Let's try this with another skill. So for example, communication. That's also a very, very important skill to have as a BMS and working in a pathology lab in general. So let's follow these steps again. Number one, talk about how you demonstrated this skill in your previous experience. Number two, why it was important. And number three, link it to the role. And finally, number four, use the golden formula: result, diagnosis, treatment. So let's curate a model answer. You could say, when I was working on a group project, I had to communicate effectively with my team on exactly which part I was working on and when I was available to meet to discuss the group project. We used WhatsApp as a form of communication, so if any one of us were struggling, we would use the app to ask for help and share our progress. And then step two, then you talk about why it was important. So you can say, this was important because we needed to make sure that each of us knew exactly on what part to work on and what area of the project was our responsibility so that the work doesn't get done twice and we waste time. It was also important for us to communicate effectively. In case someone was struggling, they could let the team know and we could help by either reallocating the workload or sharing advice. And then thirdly, you're going to try to link it to the role. So then you could go on to say effective communication would be important in my role because if I encounter a problem or there is an urgent sample that needs processing, I need to be able to communicate effectively to my seniors about the problem or notify my team of an urgent case that needs to get processed urgent. And that's also important because this doesn't waste time, and sometimes patient samples need results quickly in order to get the correct diagnosis quickly and treatment quickly. In order to do this, I can use different forms of communication such as emails, phone calls, or physically speaking to my team to ensure that everyone is in the loop and details don't get missed. And finally, finish with the golden formula. Go and say that this ensures the patient results are reached faster, which then goes on to ensure the patient gets diagnosed faster and then treated faster. Then you could go on even further to say that treatment is time sensitive, so because you did that, you potentially gave the patient a few more years to live. So you can see genuinely how important it is to be able to communicate effectively. So there you go. Use this 4-step method for any skill you want to talk about. Here's a list of examples of other skills that you could talk about and you could use the same method for. So for example, you could talk about time management, attention to detail, organization, problem solving, resourcefulness, and many others. So other skills that you could talk about is how much of a fast learner you are, how well you can work under pressure, and how you can work safely. But the take-home message for you is to use that 4-step method and that golden formula at the end. So go and apply to as many MLA jobs and BMS jobs as you can and get that interview experience. I promise you that if you use this advice, your chances of securing that position will go up by like 30, 40, 50%. If you are still unsuccessful after the interview, always ask for feedback and come back and watch this video again. Ask yourself if you really followed the steps that I've listed and don't give up on your applications. And that's it for the video. As always, if you have any questions, then leave a comment and subscribe if you want more interview tips and advice on how to become a BMS. I'm thinking of starting a community page or something similar where you can interact with other like-minded individuals. So if that's something that interests you, then let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope you benefit and take care.